Funding for the Hinckley Report is made possible in part by the George S. and Dolores Story Eccles Foundation and the Cleone Peterson Eccles Endowment Fund.
Good evening, and welcome to the Hinckley Report. I'm Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. Covering the week, we have Lisa Riley-Roche, political reporter with the Deseret News, Steve Urquhart, former state senator, and Brian Schott, managing editor at utahpolicy.com. So glad to have you all with us. Busy news week. We speculated for such a long time about Senator Hatch. Will he or won't he? Turns out he won't. But now we're on to the potential replacement. Lisa, let's start with you. Mitt Romney is the name everyone's talking about. He hasn't said anything yet. Tell us what people are saying about a potential Mitt Romney candidacy.
Well, I think there are plenty of people out there who are already starting to think of him as Senator Mitt Romney, right? I mean, not just here in Utah, but nationally. There's a huge amount of attention on this race. We don't know yet what his plans are, but all signs seem to point to a run. We've been told for weeks, if not months now, that he's been seriously looking at this, maybe putting together a campaign. Anticipation is we may hear something as soon as next week about that. And if he gets in the race, I'm not sure any other Republican will challenge him, and if they do, they probably won't be successful.
We'll talk about some of those names, but Senator, one of the big questions everyone asks now about Mitt Romney is why, if he does decide to enter the race, why would he do it?
Well, I don't understand the other side of the question, why he wouldn't. I mean, obviously he has public service in his veins. He enjoys political engagement. This is the opportunity to do some great things. I think, of course, he runs and he will win.
Brian?
I think that it's a U.S. Senate seat that's just sitting there that's his for the taking. People I've talked to said there's two camps. One, he's enjoying being a grandfather, so why would he run? But I've also heard from people that he's getting bored with cleaning the leaves out of his swimming pool, so why not run? But it is a seat that's there for the taking, and if he runs, I don't think anybody can stop him.
So what kind of impact do you think that he can have? As a freshman senator coming in following Orrin Hatch?
Well, he has reportedly told the members of our congressional delegation here in Utah that somebody's got to stand up to President Trump. I don't think he's going to make that a centerpiece of any campaign that he does. But he does have some leeway to do that here in Utah because Utah is the most anti-Trump Republican state in the union. Look at what happened in the GOP primary. He finished third, a distant third. He didn't break 50% here in 2016, and then our polling shows that President Trump's approval ratings have not moved off of that 45% that he got in the election. So there's a lot of room for Romney to take a contrarian stance to Trump, sort of fill the hole that's going to be left by Senator John McCain leaving.
Well, Lisa, what do you think about that? Because that's one of the big questions, right? Is he the foil to Donald Trump? We had a little taste of it when he gave his speech here at the University of Utah at the Hinckley Institute of Politics. But how do we balance that potential conflict?
You've got to understand with a Senator Romney, here's someone with nothing to lose. He's not thinking ahead to the next election and the one after that and the one after that, like other members of our congressional delegation might be, and most other members of Congress. He's got a lot of freedom, and he also comes from a position of national recognition, the GOP nominee in 2012, candidate in 2008. You mentioned his speech here at the Hinckley Institute that got a lot of attention during the Republican primary in 2016. So people are going to listen to what he has to say. And he has that ability to stand up because he doesn't have to worry about political consequences in the same way someone who is thinking about re-election would have to.
But he will pick his spots. I mean, it's not like he's going to go in and be part of the resistance anti-Trump. I mean, he will pick his spots. He is a mainstream Republican, so he will vote that way, but he will pick his spots when he's able to stand up to Trump and say things are wrong.
It's not policy as much as it would be style, right? I mean, he's the one that can stand up and say, you know, you may be saying the right things as a Republican on taxes, for example, but the way you're saying them, the style of trying to get things done isn't working, and someone needs to stand up to that.
Exactly.
Well, Senator, what do you think? How much of this conversation with Mitt Romney is going to be about policy, do you think?
Well, I think Mitt Romney, he does enjoy policy, and that's where he would prefer to keep the conversation. However, when he does, he will stand up to Trump. They're just really different. People take different approaches. When he does, I think we know how President Trump will react. I mean, it'll be very aggressive, very over the top. Then what happens? Will Mitt Romney be dragged into the mud, and will it be a very confrontational relationship? I mean, I'm sure that Mitt Romney would love to keep it well above board. Will that be possible if he stands up to the president?
Well, as a former elected official that's run for office a couple of times, what is the best campaign approach for Mitt Romney? How does he make his case to the people of Utah when he's not going to be there for that long? Certainly not as long as Senator Hatch was, right? So how does he make his case?
He's already made his case. I mean, his campaign needs to be high on Mitt Romney. Avoid any and all controversy. This is a no-brainer.
That easy,
it's that easy.
So we had some news reporting, Lisa, this week about some health concerns that he had last year that had been successfully treated. Is anyone really worrying about that part of the story, or what really is the story about why we now know that he went through some cancer treatment?
Well, you and I talked about that this week, and when a candidate runs for office, one of the first things they do is opposition research, of course, on their potential opponents, but they also do it on themselves to find out what may be brought out about them in a campaign, right? And so the fact that Mitt Romney had been treated, as we're told, successfully for prostate cancer last summer, could have possibly been used in a campaign against him, maybe by a more conservative Republican in the race, maybe by some of the outside groups that might look to be spending money in this race to oppose Mitt Romney, probably also conservative. So by talking about it now and with finality, it happened. I'm fine now. I can move on. I'm ready to go. We looked at his health reports from when he ran in 2012, just glowing reports from a longtime doctor about the state of his health. He gets that out of the way. It's kind of an inoculation, right, politically.
Yeah, always a good strategy in politics. Brian, one more thing on this. You reported on a poll that said that Mitt Romney would beat the only known challenger, really, Jenny Wilson, the Democrat, by 51 points.
Yeah. Well, there is another Democrat in the race, Mitchell Weiss. We did not poll him, but we polled a head-to-head between Mitt Romney and Jenny Wilson. It wasn't even close. And if you look at where Romney's support was coming, it comes from everywhere. Republicans like him. 22% of Democrats would vote for him. Independents like him. There's no way that Jenny Wilson's going to be able to overcome that 51% deficit if he runs. Wilson, she was absolutely betting that Hatch was going to run again. I've spoken to people close to her camp, and they told me Hatch is running, Hatch is running. And I think that they saw a narrow path to a win if Hatch ran again. With Romney running, no.
You don't see anyone else entering the race that could even take a dent?
I really don't. I think that he will get challenged from his right. We're hearing State Representative Dan McKay might get into the race, and he's the kind of candidate who might be able to attract some outside money, conservative PACs who have already started attacking Governor Romney and possibly entering into the race. So he might be able to do that. I really think Romney, if he gets into the race, he's going to have to do some outreach to the delegates as well, because he's going to use the signature gathering route to get on the ballot. But I think he's going to have to go through the caucus and convention system, because there's a danger that he could get thrown into a primary or lose at convention to someone like Representative McKay. So I think he really needs to focus on both of those.
Okay, Lisa, do you think he'll do both tracks?
Oh, I think he'd be silly not to. I think any candidate, why wouldn't you guarantee a place on the ballot? We saw what happened in the recent special congressional election. We had three very specific choices, all the different ways to get on the ballot, and the person that won did both.
Oh, I take the opposite approach. There's no reason for him to do the convention. I mean, if I'm Mitt Romney, I'm gathering signatures, I'm going straight to the primary. Again, the strategy has to be avoid controversy, avoid something that could wound him. He's going to win if he just takes the straightest path forward, and that would be to get signatures, go straight to the primary.
Would there not
avoid
be much
a lot of the convention nonsense that happens.
You don't think there would be much controversy from sort of the Republicans there that kind of
There
are
would
avowed
be,
supporters?
There would be, and it wouldn't matter.
Well, but we've seen candidates go through that. I'm thinking of Governor Herbert when he went through the convention process and came in second to a candidate that he very handily beat in the primary. So I think voters, if they saw Republicans attack Mitt Romney in some way for not being conservative enough at a state convention, I think that would just endear him even more.
Oh, I disagree. I mean, Romney could come in second at a convention, he could come in third, because you just don't know who the delegates are going to be. If you know you're going to win, why mess with that?
Okay, I want to talk about some of these candidates as kind of as people, given their approaches and their politics. Many people in the country saw the Golden Globes this week, and everyone's saying Oprah for president, which is interesting. Which I don't want to talk about that so much as is there room for mainstream Republican candidates in this Trump world? I mean, is this the playground for the celebrities now, or is there like a...
Well, to me, that's a really interesting question because Trump has proven that pretty much anyone can run for president and win, right? I mean, you don't need to be a politician. You don't need to have necessarily even a coherent message. You don't need to have a certain style and a certain ability to reach out to voters. You can have a lot of baggage in your past. All these things that we thought were conventional political wisdom kind of out the window. But the question for me is, do we keep going down this path and look at the Oprahs and other people without the kind of political background we're used to? Or do we suddenly feel much more comfortable with a Joe Biden or even a Mitt Romney, for example, someone that was kind of dismissed as maybe a little too establishment, a little too long-term in the political sphere. I hesitate to say too old, but you know, spending too much time as a politician. Maybe we'll feel more comfortable going back to that.
Brian, what do you think? Does the pendulum swing a little bit because
I think
of
it's
that?
going to swing, and here's why. Everything we've seen so far in the since Trump got into office, all the special elections, Democrats are overperforming everywhere. There's a wave coming. 31 Republicans have announced they're leaving Congress. The president's approval ratings are in the 30s right now. Republicans are moving towards Democrats on immigration, on spending. That's going to tamp down the base. Everyone talks about the Trump base. We've learned that the Trump base is excited to vote for one person, and that one person is Trump. They didn't show up for Roy Moore. They didn't show up in Virginia. So I think the old rules still apply. And if the old rules still apply, there's going to be a reckoning for the Republican Party in 2018. These midterm elections look to be a disaster for them. Barring something else could happen. We could see some outside event like a terrorist attack or something change the way that we're going. But if the old rules still apply, it's going to be bad. And if you look historically, the number of seats the party in Congress who has the president in the White House loses in the midterm elections when the president's approval rating is below 40, the average number is 50. And he's in the 30s. So this is bad, really bad. And so I think that we're going to see more of the mainstream candidates come to the fore because Trump, everyone is saying, do the rules apply anymore? I think that they do. I think Trump is a one-off.
Interesting.
Everything Brian said is true and should apply, but I don't think it will. I think that President Trump just somehow ripped up the rule book. And so I was having this conversation the other day with a friend. When Trump is the focus of the conversation, Trump somehow just always wins. And I think that Democrats, if they solidly said, this is our message, these are the things we will do, yes, they would trounce. They would triumph in the midterms. I don't see them doing that. I think they're going to talk about Trump, Trump, Trump. And I think Republicans, will hold the Senate, just because Democrats have too many seats up in play. And I think they might even shockingly hold the House.
So Trump remains very strong with that particular group, or wins, as you say. So the celebrity still wins? The celebrity status of someone still carries the day in politics.
It's someone without political record. I mean, you know, look at all the folks recently elected in Utah who never held office. Jason Chaffetz, Mike Lee, Mia Love, Chris Stewart. You can come in and no one can say, why did you vote this way on X, Y, and Z? There are no votes. So you're clean slate. You can just come and you can be all things to all people.
Okay. Both sides have their... Did you have one final comment on that?
I was going to say, some of the people you just mentioned, though, did come up from a political background, right?
But they'd never taken a vote.
Well, not in Congress, but Mia Love had been a mayor and a council member.
She had been a mayor. Jason hadn't. Mike Lee hadn't. Chris Stewart hadn't.
But they all had political ties, political experience in some shape or form, right? And Trump is the exception to that idea that you have to have at least some interest in politics and some connection to politics to be successful.
Let's talk about a candidate that has a lot of history in politics that made some major shockwaves this week. Speaker Greg Hughes has said he's not going to run again. Really, he says he's not going to run as Speaker again, which he said meant he's not running for his House seat again. Senator, we'll start with you. What kind of impact is this going to have, and maybe a little bit of the calculus on this decision?
So I went into the House 2 years before Greg came in, and it's been fun watching his trajectory. I mean, came in, you know, very brash. You could even say a bit out of control. It's been fun to watch him mature as a political leader. Now he's aggressive, he's hard charging, but he's really using it in great ways. You look at Operation Rio Grande, what he's doing on the opioid crisis, United Way, preschool. He's doing some great things. And Greg, I saw your quote. Greg, he's always calculating politically. Yeah. And no way is he done. And so I think that he will run for governor in 2020. So Norm Bangerter obviously ran that path successfully in 1984, as Brian wrote today and wrote in his piece. But he saw Marty Stevenson when he first came in try to run for governor as Speaker. That was a burden on him. So I think Greg wants to be free of voting. He doesn't want to have to take a vote in the next year or two before the election. And I think that he's just clearing the decks, getting ready for the gubernatorial campaign.
Lisa, thoughts on that?
I think that's actually an excellent analysis. I don't think anyone thinks Greg Hughes is going to go away. The way he inserted himself and the state in the Rio Grande situation, the way he continues to be a very flamboyant figure. I was at a tax conference earlier this week where he started joking about not riding bicycles because he's a grown man. Why would he? and just really engaging the crowd. Yeah. I mean, he's somebody that can just stand up and speak on pretty much anything and bring everyone in. So he's going to use that probably for governor.
So that's one of the interesting questions, because all of you gave examples of very local issues that he's worked on. Of course, he's been the Speaker doing that. Brian, do you think that is really the signal that it is governor and he's not going to jump in this race against Mitt Romney or a House race?
I think he does want to run for governor in 2020. I mean, everyone I've talked to said that. I think the problem with leaving the speakership for him is he's going to have to find a way to stay in the public eye. He can't disappear for a year and then start running for the governor's mansion in 2019. He's going to have to find a way to keep that attention. I don't think Operation Rio Grande is an issue that propels you from a House seat in Draper to the governor's mansion. I don't think the opioid crisis is an issue that propels you from a House seat in Draper to the governor's mansion. He's going to have to find a way to insert himself in the story on some of these larger issues in the state, and I expect he will start that this year in order to start laying the groundwork for that.
Don't you think of all the politicians that we all know, he's the one that can keep himself in the limelight for a couple years?
Absolutely. You know, but he's got to pick his spots, not overplay his hand. The thing that's going to help him is the media likes talking to him. He's not a media darling like Spencer Cox, who the media just fawns over, but we like talking to him because he gives a good quote. You know, you're always going to give a good quote for him. He's going to have to find a way, hire a good PR person. Anytime something happens, start calling people and say, hey, I want to weigh in on this, I want to weigh in on that.
Okay. Want to transition into an issue that you talked about just a few minutes ago. We talked about whether or not someone chooses to go through the caucus convention to get on the ballot, or whether they do the signatures entirely. But this is an interesting week for a new development. There's a Count My Vote initiative, which is a dual track, preserving the dual track to get onto the ballot. But Brian, you reported on this first about this group called Keep My Voice Initiative. Tell us what this is, and then we'll talk about the opportunities.
It is a ballot initiative aiming to get on the 2018 ballot that would completely repeal SB 54, which establishes the dual path route to the ballot. It's a bunch of people who are big fans of the caucus and convention system. They want to keep it, so they want to get rid of that. They claim that allowing candidates to gather signatures and get on the ballot has done real harm to the Republican Party. And the person they bring up is John Curtis, who used to be a Democrat, and now he is in Congress as a member of the GOP, and they don't like that. And so they want to say who is a Republican. They don't want a person to say, I'm a Republican. They want to be able to say, no, we think you're a Republican, or no, you're not a Republican. And so they have this ballot initiative. What they're planning on doing is they're going to try and get their signatures at the neighborhood caucus meetings in March. It's an interesting plan. It's going to take a Herculean effort, and people I talk to say it's going to be very, very hard for them to meet that 113,000 signature goal. And also, can we talk a little bit about the irony that they have to gather signatures to get on the ballot?
Yes.
Well, and it's so funny, the math they must be doing. They're saying, they point to the problem of John Curtis being elected to Congress. Well, their caucus convention endorsed candidate, when he went into a bigger field, got trounced by John Curtis. So, I mean, they probably won't get on the ballot, but I think if they get on the ballot, they probably will attract tens of votes. I mean,
if you look at it, it seems to me to be nothing more than a cynical attempt to confuse voters when they're looking at two competing ballot initiatives that do similar things. You vote no on both.
That may be the case. What do you think, Lisa? Is that the case? And maybe a quick comment on the name of these. Sometimes you try to do this by a bumper sticker. Count My Vote, Keep My Voice. These are just very interesting, seemingly similar.
Oh, it's so confusing. When I was talking to the Keep My Voice guy on the phone about the initiative, I kept saying Keep My Vote.
Yeah,
so clearly it's confusing,
about.
right? And I think Brian makes a really good point that it may well be an attempt to just confuse voters because you do have two very competing initiatives, and we're already at so many initiatives on the ballot. You know, there's a good chance that people are just going to give up and vote no on everything because it's just too hard to sort out.
So this is 6, right?
This is the
That would be number 6.
Yes. Well, and we need to recognize, too, that this is tied into the lawsuit that split the state Republican Party over SB 54. It's the same group funding this initiative that's funding the continuation of that lawsuit, despite efforts by the party chairman to put an end to it and move on.
So I'm going to go back to the Mitt Romney convention versus primary route. If this is going to be stirring in your neighborhood caucus meetings when delegates are being elected, will you sign the pledge for the caucus? Do you want to jump into that fight? All the more reason for Mitt just to completely avoid that nonsense.
That's true. He was very much involved in the initial SB 54 effort to come up with a compromise.
It was indeed. I want to spend just a couple minutes on immigration. They say in Washington, D.C., a little snag has occurred on DACA. We have all these students, these Cambridge children, through, as I say, no fault of their own. They're here, but productive members of our society, and both sides are kind of using them in the middle. Lisa, what is the current status in Washington, D.C. on this issue? And let's talk about where it's going from here.
You know, it is just almost impossible to untangle all of this, I think, because you've got a situation where you've got these DACA students and others going to lose in a situation where they're going to lose their status shortly if there is an action taken. It was always intended to be a temporary fix because there was no Dreamers program which would create a path to citizenship for kids brought here at a young age, as you say, through no fault of their own, who have gone on and lived good lives, gone to school, gone into the military, own homes, have kids. I talked to a couple a few months ago at an immigration rally. They were pushing a stroller with their baby, and both of them had good jobs, both of them had gone through college, both of them were DACA, and both of them were concerned at that point. So I can imagine now how they must feel. What we've got to figure out, though, is whether the president can indeed create some kind of bipartisan solution to this. It's not looking good.
Yeah, that's true. Senator, this seems to be the issue, whether you can find a bipartisan solution. Does either the Republicans or Democrats really not want this to be fixed for that particular segment of the population?
I think there's a huge group in the middle that wants this to be fixed. This has to be fixed. You know, the Houston Astros won the World Series after decades of failure. There have been decades of failure of Congress to deal with immigration. I'm going to bet on them this year. They just have to get this right. They're really a pretty incompetent lot these days. But they did pass tax reform, so maybe they can carry some of that momentum and pass something on DACA. There's huge middle ground there. I think they're going to find it.
Well, Brian, what do you think? If there is so much middle ground, what is the problem?
I think the problem is that Republicans actually have to start working with Democrats on this issue, and Democrats have leverage right now. They want to fix DACA, and they are holding up talks over a long-term spending bill in order to do that. You hear Dick Durbin talk about that all the time. This is really the only time that they have leverage on something, although Democratic voters are very, very interested in getting something done on DACA. There was a memo released on Wednesday morning, or leaked, that said that Democrats are really worried about the midterm elections. They don't think they'll make big gains unless they can do something about this issue. So there is impetus on both sides. It's not good for the GOP because, again, their hard right base, they don't want them to move toward the Democratic Party on immigration, and they're going to have to. So that's going to tamp down the base a little bit. Democrats have the leverage here because they are saying we will not pass a long-term spending bill until we get a fix for this.
Well, do they remember how to work together? Last time they did it.
That's a good point.
Yes, we're going to watch this one very closely. This is a very important part of the population to watch. Thank you for your insights today. Really appreciate it. That's it for tonight's show. The conversation continues online at kued.org/Hinckley Report. We'll see you next week. Thank you and good night.